Have you ever felt just completely swamped by life? Pulled every which way by notifications, demands, that mental checklist that never seems to end. It feels impossible sometimes to find any real clarity, any peace in all that noise. But what if this secret wasn't about escaping it all? What if it was about cultivating this really deep inner awareness right there inside the chaos? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're actually stepping back, way back to the 17th century. We're exploring the insights of François Fénelon and his work, The Inner Life. Our mission here for this deep dive is to pull out the most useful practical nuggets from his writing. We want to figure out what this inner life thing really means for you today and how you can use these principles, which are surprisingly timeless, to get that clarity and focus we're all after.
Yeah, Fenelon is maybe an unexpected guide for this, but incredibly relevant. He was a French priest and archbishop living back in the 17th century, a time of, well, big changes spiritually and socially. He gets linked with Quietism, which was this spiritual movement focused on a very direct inner experience of God, often through deep stillness. Now, Quietism itself got a bit controversial, sometimes seen as bypassing the church, but Fenelon's own writings, especially The Inner Life, they've really lasted. They offer this kind of blueprint for inner peace that honestly feels spot on for anyone trying to navigate our crazy modern world.
Right. And look, before you start worrying about, decoding 17th century language, don't. Our goal is really to strip away the old phrasing, the specific theology maybe, and just translate his core ideas into something clear, something actionable that connects with your life right now. So, okay, let's unpack this. Fénelon starts us off with something that sounds, well, almost too simple. He basically says you don't need a special quiet room or hours of meditation. He suggests we should recollect ourselves during the day and in the midst of our occupations by a simple view of God. He's saying, like, cultivate this continuous, simple turning inward towards whatever your highest purpose or presence is, even when you're totally busy on the outside.
Exactly. And recollect ourselves. It doesn't necessarily mean formal prayer, although it could include that. It's more about keeping this aware connection, to your deep values, your guiding principles, even in the middle of the busiest moments. Imagine just being truly present, truly purposeful in whatever you're doing, however ordinary it seems. Fenelon says you should be more occupied with God, or let's say that core principle, than with everything else. It's about being rightly engaged by doing what's in front of you, but with that higher awareness.
Okay, so practically then,
Yeah.
if we translate God to maybe core purpose or truth, how do you do that? How do you actually keep that recollection going when you're, I don't know, drowning in emails or stuck in traffic or just trying to listen to someone?
And this is where it gets really revolutionary for today. It mirrors so much of what we now call mindfulness or intentionality. Fenelon specifically says you don't need to wait for a leisure hour. You don't need to bar your doors. He points out that even the most interrupted moments, even while eating or listening to others, are valuable. Those are his words. He even throws out this amazing challenge, that feeling of regret you have, oh, I wish I had time for quiet reflection. That regret, that feeling, is the time you could be using for recollection.
Wow.
It's about grabbing those little micro moments to just recenter instantly.
That just completely demolishes the no time excuse, doesn't it? And it connects right into another really practical thing he suggests for getting what he calls interior solitude and liberty of soul, basically. Mental space, freedom from inner chaos. Fénelon says, make it a rule to put an end, at the close of every action, to all reflections upon it. Just stop thinking about it.
Yes. It's like mental hygiene. He's talking about stopping that endless loop, replaying successes with vain joy or getting stuck in sorrow over mistakes. It's a powerful way to prevent your mind just becoming this cluttered mess of thoughts spinning round and round, getting you nowhere.
He paints this picture of the ideal state. Happy is he whose mind contains only what is necessary and who thinks of nothing except when it is time to think of it. I mean, honestly, in our world, that sounds like an actual superpower. How do we even get close to that?
It really does sound like a superpower, right? But it's a goal worth aiming for. For us today, this translates directly into stopping rumination, breaking anxiety cycles, reducing that cognitive overload we all feel. It's about consciously choosing to let go of what's done good or bad and freeing up that mental RAM, so to speak, to actually be present for whatever comes next. It's not about being thoughtless, not at all. It's about being incredibly efficient, really intentional with where your mental energy goes.
Okay, let's shift to time itself. In his section on the employment of time, Fénelon makes this pretty radical claim. He says, there is a time for everything in our lives, but the maxim that governs every moment is that there should be none useless, that they should all enter into the order and sequence of our salvation, which suggests Every single second has some profound purpose. No wasted moments.
He really pushes that idea. It's quite counterintuitive. He argues that what we often label as distractions or, barren moments, things we wish would just go away, they're actually part of a bigger, purposeful picture. He says God, or you could say the universe or life's flow, has never assigned us a barren moment, nor one which we can consider as given up to our own discretion. So every circumstance, even the annoying ones, the difficult ones, they have a role to play in our growth, in aligning us with purpose.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Fénelon points to what he sees as this fundamental mistake most of us make, often without even realizing it. It's this subtle, maybe unconscious seeking of our own self-interest, even when we think we're doing good things, he says. For we misemploy our time, not only when we do wrong or do nothing, but also when we do something else than what was incumbent on us at the moment. So, doing the wrong good thing or the right thing at the wrong time, that's still missing the mark.
This is such a deep insight. He calls it refined self-interest. It's not the obvious, me first selfishness. It's much sneakier. He points out that even people really dedicated to spiritual growth or personal development can be strongly ingenious in perpetually seeking our own interest, but in a refined manner, under favor of some pretext which serves as a veil. It's that little voice inside, isn't it? Okay, I know I should be doing X, but first I'll just quickly check Y because that will make me feel better. Or, sure, I'm helping out, but doesn't it feel good to be needed? It really makes you ask, doesn't it? How often do we rationalize, convince ourselves we're acting purely, when deep down there's this subtle thread of serving our own needs, our own ego?
And that feels like it leads right into another concept he really hammers home: the absolute importance of fidelity in small matters. It sounds so simple, be faithful in small things, but I have a feeling it's incredibly hard.
Oh, it really is, because it goes right to the heart of that subtle self-interest we were just talking about. Fénelon draws this contrast between great virtues, the big, heroic actions that are rare, often public, get applause, make us feel good about ourselves, and the small occasions. These little moments, he says, are unforeseen. They occur every moment and place us incessantly in conflict with our pride, our sloth, our self-esteem, and our passions. He even says, quite bluntly, it would please us much better to make some great sacrifice and retain our old habits and little things.
Yeah, why is that? Why are we often up for the grand gesture, but we trip up over the tiny everyday choices, the small kindness, the moment of patience?
Because those small matters are where the real, constant internal friction happens. They're where we bump up against those subtle layers of ego and self-interest moment by moment. Fénelon talks about the cumulative effect. Neglecting these little things makes the soul accustomed to unfaithfulness, or maybe for us, accustomed to drifting away from our core purpose, our better self. He describes how this tiny neglect, starting as but an atom, eventually becomes a mountain. It creates this kind of chaos between it and God, or between us and our deepest truth. It really highlights how much those seemingly trivial daily choices stack up, affecting our whole inner state or connection to purpose.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly to how Fénelon views prayer. He describes it very simply as an inward turning with love toward the presence of God within. But he also warns about a really common trap, something anyone seeking deeper connection or growth might fall into.
Yes, indeed. He notices that people often start a practice, spiritual or otherwise, and experience this initial sweetness or consolation, those wonderful feelings of peace, connection, insight. But then, inevitably, those feelings fade. The gifts are withdrawn, as he puts it, and that's when people lose heart. He says many are tempted to believe that they no longer pray, or maybe we'd say the practice isn't working anymore when they cease to enjoy a certain pleasure in doing it. The good vibes are gone, so they quit.
So he offers this incredibly counterintuitive idea. Perfect prayer is only another name for love to God. And crucially, it does not consist in sweet feelings, nor in the charms of an excited imagination. It's not about chasing the feel-good payoff.
Exactly. He actually values what he calls dry, desolate prayer. Those times when the practice feels hard, unrewarding, maybe even empty or pointless. He argues this isn't failure. It actually serves a vital purpose. It forces the soul, he says, to attach itself immediately and solely to God instead of to his mercies. Meaning, you're pushed to connect to the core principle, the purpose itself, purely for its own sake, not just for the nice feelings or benefits it might give you. He calls this chaste love, loving the ultimate truth for the truth, not for what you get out of it. And here's the fascinating part. Often, in those moments of struggle, when you think that everything is going to ruin, that's precisely when, as he says, the foundations are just beginning to be solidly laid.
Wow, that is such a paradox, isn't it? that real progress often feels like setback or struggle. He really leans into that paradox. He says, we expect gain and not loss, consolation and not suffering, but the whole of interior work is of an opposite character, to be lost, sacrificed, made less than nothing, that we may be forced to cling to him alone. It sounds like it's all about stripping away everything not essential, getting down to the absolute core. So where does all this lead? What's the root cause Fénelon keeps circling back to? He makes this incredibly bold statement. The source of all our defects is the love of self. We refer everything to that instead of to the love of God. He's basically saying that subtle self-interest, that egocentric view, is the fundamental problem.
That really is his central point, isn't it? And it's a tough one for us today in our world that values self-actualization, individuality so much. He warns that even our best efforts to improve ourselves can still be driven by self-love. We want to be better for our own sake, maybe to look good or just feel good about ourselves. The only real way past this, he argues, is to get rid of self, to deny himself, using the language of Christ. It means shedding the ego, the personal agenda, that inner me that constantly wants things its own way. He believes this radical step strikes at once at the root of every evil and finds in the simple abandonment of self the germ of every good. It's about letting go of the small self to align with something much bigger.
Okay, that idea of simple abandonment of self,
Yeah.
it sounds almost impossible, maybe even undesirable from a modern perspective. We're taught to build ourselves up, pursue our dreams. How do you practically apply this radical letting go, without just becoming passive or neglecting responsibilities?
Well, Fénelon gives some surprisingly down-to-earth advice here. He sums it up. Do not reason too much. Stop the endless overthinking and analysis. Also, always have an upright purpose in the smallest matters. Be intentional, even in tiny things. And crucially, pay no attention to the thousand reflections by which we wrap and bury ourselves in self under the pretense of correcting our faults. Stop the obsessive self-monitoring, especially when it's really just feeding your pride or insecurity.
And he even applies this to how we deal with messing up, with failures, which feels so relevant today when there's so much pressure to be perfect.
Exactly. He says getting all distressed about our faults, clinging to that feeling, that's merely a form of pride. It's our ego being bruised because it hates looking imperfect. It's not genuine humility. Instead, his advice is, be not discouraged, go straight on, quietly bear the humiliation of your fault before God without being troubled by the anguish of a wounded pride that cannot bear to see itself imperfect.
Your mistake, paradoxically, can actually help you die to self, become nothing before him. It can strip away your pretenses, make you more real, more humble. So it's all about just keeping moving forward, not getting stuck, beating yourself up. He says our illumination discovers the lightest transgressions, but never discourages. If we stumble, we hasten to resume our way and have no watchword but onward. Just keep going.
Right. And he offers this really comforting reassurance, too. He says this path, this way of being, while it might feel hard at first, God will gradually make it pleasant and easy for you. Why? Because true love is obedient without constraint and without strife or effort. It eventually becomes a natural flow, not a constant struggle.
And this path ultimately is what leads to true liberty, a liberty that comes precisely from this self-abandonment, from becoming less than nothing. That phrase, becoming less than nothing, it can sound a bit, well, scary on the surface, can it? Like losing yourself.
It can sound that way, definitely. But Fénelon sees it as the ultimate freedom. He encourages us. Let us cast all our cares, then, into the bosom of so good a Father and suffer him to do as he pleases. Which translates to, release your anxieties, your rigid plans, your tight grip on how things should be, and just allow life or the universe or God to unfold. Trust the process. Let us be content to adopt his will in all points and to abandon our own will absolutely and forever. It's about trusting a wisdom greater than our own limited perspective. How can we retain anything of our own, he asks, when we do not even belong to ourselves? It's a radical kind of trust.
And the result he describes is just surprisingly simple. He says, having thrown off the burden of self, which we formerly carried, we are astounded to behold the simplicity and straightness of the way. Quote, we thought there was a need of strife and constant exertion, but we now perceive that there is little to do, that it is sufficient to look to God with confidence, regarding him as a loving Father who leads us every moment by the hand. It's this amazing shift from effort and struggle to surrender and trust, and finding that somehow life gets easier, clearer. Wow, okay, that was quite a journey through Fénelon's The Inner Life. A really deep dive. It feels like a fundamental shift he's proposing, moving away from constant striving, from subtle self-interest towards something simpler, more trusting and deeply purposeful. It could change how you approach literally everything in your day.
It really could. And if we were to boil down some key actionable things to take away from this deep dive, maybe try these. First, practice micro-recollection. Find those tiny moments in the busyness, waiting for the kettle, walking down the hall to just briefly turn inward, reconnect with your purpose. Don't wait for the perfect quiet hour. Second, cultivate mental hygiene. Seriously, practice letting go. When an action is done, make it a rule, like Fénelon says, to put an end to reflections on it. Stop the replaying, good or bad. Free up your mind. Third, embrace the small matters. Recognize that real character, real connection to purpose is built in those seemingly trivial moments, the patient response, the focused listening, the small task done well. That's where the work really happens. Fourth, reframe difficulty. When things feel hard, dry, unrewarding, whether it's a project, a relationship, a practice, consider that maybe, just maybe, this is when the real foundations are being laid. Progress isn't always comfortable. Fifth, constantly, gently, question your motivations. Ask yourself, is there a subtle thread of self-interest here? Am I doing this for the outcome, the recognition, or for the act itself, aligned with my deeper values? Be honest. And finally, let go of self-criticism born of pride. If you mess up, acknowledge it, learn from it, and then, as Fénelon says, go straight on. Don't get stuck in the anguish of a wounded pride, just move forward.
That's a fantastic summary. Really powerful takeaways. And maybe here's a final thought for you to chew on after this deep dive. If Fénelon is right, if true liberty really comes from becoming less than nothing, from letting go of that burden of self, what's just one small aspect of that burden of self, maybe a specific worry, a need for control, a bit of pride, that you could choose to gently set down today, even just experimentally, to see what kind of simplicity might emerge? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope it sparks some exploration for you into your own inner life.